surprise to rock. Oh, what else can I say? I'm just a big old car. Well, you know I come from a long line of cocks just like me, who never stop believing despite our history. Cause though there's been heartbreak and oh so many tears, I know one day I won't have to say wait until next year. Cause I watched every quarter of 2010, from the beach down of Bama to Atlanta's bitter end. And I've cheered for Alshon Jeffrey, Melvin Ingram and Connor Shaw, and Jadeveon and Marcus were the best I ever saw. Yeah, and I hate them Georgia Bulldogs, Florida Gators, and Rocky Top. Oh, what else can I say? I'm just a big old car. Yes, and when I die, I have just one request. So if you could, would you promise me this? These boys can still kick the SEC's ass right now. I play quarterback probably, right? I just hand you the ball. I just hand you the ball every time. I've got 1 year of eligibility left, guys, in case you need me. All right, boys and girls, this is the emotional part of the song. If something happens to me between now and the last weekend in November, I want y'all to throw me in the cooler at Steel Hands and bring me out on that Saturday when we're going to kick Clemson's ass. And we're going to have one hell of a party. We're going to have, Ryan's going to be there, Corey's going to be there, Eric. Oh, that's Brian. Oh, he was good. Yeah. Hey, Brian Maddox right there. All right, so listen, boys and girls. We're going to have a hell of a tailgate party if that's where, and even if I don't die, we're still going to do it, okay? And the Midnight Choir is going to be there. And this is how it's going to go down. Coach Beamer's going to show up too. Who else is here? Any more Gamecocks in the house? Any more former Gamecocks still here? Hey, I will tell you this. Tannehill and I text. You know, he got in a wreck a week or two ago. He said he's got some tests they're doing on him, but we all got to wish Tannehill well tonight, all right? So let's have a little moment of silence for Steve. Hold on, come on. And now give him a big go Cocks. Come on. Because who doesn't love a mullet on a big, quarterback, You ready, Corey? You ready?
I'm ready.
Here it goes, boys and girls. Put a keg on my coffin inside the state fairgrounds. Serve chicken and biscuits with all the fixings. Gather everyone around. Have Coach Beamer say some words. Let Hootie lead the choir. And then send the boys off to destroy them damned old Clemson Tigers. Cause I heard all the stories of the great George Rogers. Now back in 1980, he made the whole nation holler. And I've seen that photograph of young Steve Tannehill up at Old Death Valley, signing his name on the field. Yeah, and I love to hear 2001 if they're waiting surprise to rock. Oh, what else can I say? Until my dying day, I'll be a South Carolina Gamecock. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. Hold on. Yes, I will. All right, hold on. Over here. I grew up with this man playing guitar every morning. I like to call I call my dad the human alarm clock. Because every morning at 6:29, he'd crank his Marshall up to about 11. And he'd play some Led Zeppelin or some Jimi Hendrix or some Allman Brothers and shake our asses right out of bed. So if you will, put your hands together for the man, the myth, the legend, my old man, Mr. Rusty, the human alarm clock Davis. Give him some chicken picking, Daddy. So put a keg on my coffin inside the state fairgrounds. Serve chicken and biscuits with all the fixings, gather everyone around. Corey, come back. Have Coach Beamer say some words. Let Mark Bryan lead the choir. And this send the boys off to destroy them damned old Clemson Tigers. 'Cause I've heard all stories of the great George Rogers. Now back in 1980, they made the whole nation holler. And I've seen that photograph of young C. Tanny Hill up in Old Death Valley, signing his name on the field. Yeah, and I love to hear 2001 and Bill Williams Prize to rock. Oh, what else can I say? Until my dying day, I'll be a South Carolina Gamecock. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. A big old car.
What do y'all say we do this again next year, boys and girls?
And what's up, Gamecock Nation? That is the sights and sounds. Had to put it on them a little bit, Chris. The sights and sounds of Patrick Davis and his Midnight Choir from Friday. Again, people are maybe tired of hearing about it by now, but I got to throw another shout out to everybody that helped make the party possible. Could not have gone better. We had great guests. We had great speakers, former players. Shout out to Michael Haney, our MC. Preston Thorne and Langston Moore helped, absolutely carry the show. Awesome dudes, awesome talents. All the former players. We had 3 head coaches who made appearances. Coach Shelley Smith with women's soccer, Frank Martin, men's basketball, and, of course, Shane Beamer, the surprise appearance. Shout out to all of them, and shout out to everybody who came out for what was just a really, really awesome night. And I would say first of many. Chris, we're back to football talk, man. We are 1 week from being in a game week situation. This time next week, I will be talking to you about Clint Hammond and the Mortgage Network, and I'll be saying, we made it. It is game week. That is 1 week away. South Carolina, plenty to talk about. Still many storylines to go. Chris, how's it going, man? Let's get down to it.
Yeah, it's exciting times, man. Preseason kickoff party at good timing because now the team is kind of coming out of that camp mode, and now you're getting into your actual preparations for game 1 against Eastern Illinois. And by the way, Wes, still working on locking in a special guest for the show, possibly maybe not this week, but the next, related to Eastern Illinois. I know we talked on the show earlier on a previous edition that we don't know a lot about Eastern Illinois. So whether it's on GamecockCentral.com or it's here on GC Live, or really both, we're going to have more on Eastern Illinois, I hope, in great detail. So still working on that. But, yeah, now it's about getting ready, for Eastern Illinois, coming out of camp where you're kind of working on South Carolina. Now as the game gets closer and closer, you're getting into that mode of let's hone in on Eastern Illinois and get ready for that game. And that's what it's going to be about from here on out, week to week, preparing for each opponent that you face, and that happens to be game 1. So obviously a ton of storylines within the team, not even breaking down that particular matchup. It's not the most intriguing of the season because Eastern Illinois is one of, not many, but one of a few of those teams that you look at this year and a lot of people kind of putting it in the win column. Obviously, it's not a guarantee. I think people are more concerned with the internal storylines with South Carolina, starting with quarterback and then moving to a lot of other little subplots within this team.
Yeah, man. So it's fun that, like you said, generally, if you just threw out those 2 teams, nobody's getting really excited. Like this was a week 8 game. This is the game that people maybe take their young kid to the game for the first time, or, maybe you invite your cousin into town because the tickets are going to be a little bit easier to get. Like, this is not a usual big game matchup, but because you have a new head coach, a new era, a new offensive coordinator, new defense coordinator, new special teams. Pretty much everything is new. It will be one of the most highly anticipated games of the entire season, just because, not because of the opponent. The opponent is really, no offense, is kind of inconsequential. It's more about South Carolina. This game is about South Carolina, about the program, about the direction that Carolina wants to take things offensively, defensively, special teams, and all the way around. So that's what makes it fun, and that is what I believe people will turn out for. Before we get any further, got to tell everybody about our good friend, Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network. He is our presenting sponsor here on GC Live. Check out ClintHammond.com for more information. Or if you're just already in the market for a new home, I know a lot of people are buying and selling homes right now. If you sell your house, you got to go buy one as well. So hit up Clint, 803-771-6933. You see on the screen right there, his NMLS number is 71597. Or you just shoot him an email, chammond@mortgagenetwork.com. One of my best friends just bought a house through Clint last week or the week before. I don't remember exactly. But once again, A+, 5-star, 100%. Awesome, smooth transaction. Clint will do the same for you. Give him a shout. Again, shout out to Clint. He is the presenting sponsor right here on the show. All right. I still don't know a ton about Eastern Illinois. We will get into that. Like Chris said, maybe we will have a guest, but right now we're still about South Carolina and some story. It always happens like this, Chris. Storylines, we think we know what the storylines are. Sometimes it goes by the script and sometimes it doesn't. Who would have thought? So I was on 107.5 The Game right before we came on the show here. Who would have thought that when talking about starters, Chris, let's say a month ago, 2 months ago, that I would have said this sentence? I believe there's a good chance that Zeb Nolan will hand the football off to Zaquandre White on the first drive of the game as part of the first string.
Yeah, definitely not the first part of that sentence. The Zaquandre White thing you could maybe say,
but even then, though, I feel like
even then, I mean that one, yeah, and I'm not. I know Zaquandre's been taking, as we've reported, there have been first team reps he's had, and you've reported very accurately. But I mean, could that change even, right? But between now and then, maybe we heard a lot of positive.
It easily could, but I'm just saying that it's even
right.
that it's even like a strong. If let's say the season started this past Saturday at the scrimmage, that Todd Ellis would be saying Zeb Nolan hands the ball off to Zaquandre White. Like
I mean it's wild. It's only slightly less, believable than if at that point, than if you would have said Shane Beamer is going to take the first snap. I mean, because they pulled a coach off the field, but I mean, we didn't know, no reason to know it or research it, that Zeb Nolan had an extra year of eligibility, and here we go. I think about that often. I think about that day at camp when we saw him, and literally the quote we heard, "That's a guy named Zeb." Like that's what we heard. Like that could be the headline of a story. That's a guy named Zeb. He played at North Dakota State. We kept hearing that, and we're just going, wow. But I remember the last show we did, Wes. I mean, I feel like people are going to start playing it over and over, but I was sitting there saying, is Zeb Nolan going to play a lot this season? Probably not, right? But this thing has kept building and building and building to where now, for those of you who have not read Russ's recent Carolina Confidential on GamecockCentral.com, I highly recommend you go and check that out today.
Yeah, and I mean, I was right there with you, man. It just shows how quickly things can progress or change. And I mean, I was sitting there saying, I feel like they're sort of getting Jason Brown ready. Like this is the way it's headed. And then you sort of, I would say, we try to hint at what was going on last Friday as well, because the information was already starting to change, and you have to be careful because, man, people will call you out these days. Like if it changes, you can be completely accurate, and then let's say Jason Brown has the best week of practice of his life this week, and they're like, man, Jason's looked too good to not start. That's
Yeah.
always a possibility.
Right.
And people will be like, well, you're dumb. You know what said last week that it was going to be Zep, you know. By all indications, it has not been decided yet. And it's still kind of a situation where one guy can take it. But, and I see Brad on Facebook, and this is, I like to see the reactions from fans to the information. But I will say, I think we got to put the Muschamp era just behind us all. The Colin Hill comparison, I mean, it's an older transfer quarterback. Where else does that comparison fit? I mean,
yeah, I mean, I guess he's not as mobile, but I mean,
but they're different players.
They're different players.
They're different coaches with a different offense.
Completely different circumstances. I mean, you could compare. You could say, just to be fair, I mean, you could say that reminds me of. I mean, how many pocket passer transfer quarterbacks have transferred to a school in history? A bunch. I mean, you could say that reminds me of that or that. But you're right. I mean, I understand.
Joe Burrow.
Right. You go there. I mean, I understand the deal with, and we've seen that a lot, not just with quarterback, with any decision, with recruiting, whatever it may be, anything related to this football team or recruiting, we see a lot of comparisons with the Muschamp era or the Spurrier era. It stands on its own. So this is a new thing. There's literally one on-field coach left over from the Muschamp era who's a position coach who is now coaching with this team. That's Mike Peterson. That's the only one.
And a very successful.
And a successful one. So he's not – it's not the same offense. It's not the same defense. It's not the same philosophy and coaching. It's not the same philosophy with how the programs run. There are a lot of different things. So if Zeb Nolan ends up being the starter or plays in X number of games this year, the success that he has or doesn't have will have zero to do with Muschamp, the past era. It'll have nothing to do with how other transfer quarterbacks at other schools have fared. It'll have zero to do with Steve Spurrier. It won't have anything to do with that. So the interesting thing is also, Wes, I think it's worth pointing out, game 1 starter, not necessarily game 2 starter, game 3, these things could all change. We've seen that a lot. We've seen that when Connor Shaw was on this roster back in the day, if we want to start saying what reminds us of what, So I don't know. It's not an apples to apples comparison, and it's not a deal where Zeb Nolan is the same guy as Colin Hill or whatever. I understand it, but I agree with you, Wes, because we've talked about this a lot. At some point, everybody's got to move on and just let things play out, with a new staff, with a new program.
Yeah, and I'm not certainly picking on Brad's opinion here, and Brad has followed up and said, I want to see these other young guys. That's all, not a guy who doesn't have a long-term future. And that certainly makes sense.
Sure.
But here's my and not that coaches are, what's the word, infallible, not that they can't make the wrong decision, because that coaches, anybody makes wrong decisions all the time. Like nobody is perfect. There's a right decision and a wrong decision. We'll see how it plays out. But what the point I'm trying to get at is, yes, Zeb Nolan has 1 year of eligibility. Yes, if he ends up being the starter, Chris, when he gets announced as starter, there will be these national headlines that will say they will be focused on coach turned quarterback to start for South Carolina. That will be the focus, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
If you're a South Carolina fan, that does not matter. Doesn't matter if they literally pulled, Beamer said he didn't pull a quarterback out of 5 points. It doesn't matter if he literally pulled somebody out of the Still Hands party on Friday and suited him up and put him in a uniform. If he gives South Carolina the best chance to start 2-0, in my opinion. I'm going to go ahead and take it to the second one. For this conversation, we're assuming this is with no Luke Doty, because where the program is right now, I think we have to sort of recognize big picture. Everyone is very excited. There's a new hope, a new energy, and all that is a very good thing for the future of the program. Small picture, week 1, week 2, week 3, this 2021 season, it's going to be tough. Like, they're going to have to grind out some wins. So the coaches, Beamer's never going to go up there in the press conference and say Eastern Illinois is awful. But we can sit here and say Eastern Illinois is not some great football team. The only way South Carolina loses to Eastern Illinois is if they go out there and do not protect the football and put it on the turf 7 times. So what gives you the best chance of just having a solidified quarterback position and sending a guy out there to manage the game? If it is Zeb Nolan, then you have to make that decision, and you don't care about the PR, the reaction, any of that stuff. Because, yes, I get what Brad's saying. Everybody wants to see new guys. They want to see new quarterbacks. They want to see new players. I'm the same way. Following the team, I want to see what new guys can do. I'm ready to see what can Amarian Brown do at receiver. I'm ready to see what some new dudes can do. But for the betterment of the long-term future of this program, they have to find as many wins as possible this season to sell it to the guys that are on the fence right now. The guys, we've talked about it, Chris, the guys that are on the fence are guys that could play at any program in the country. Antonio Williams, Stone Blanton, Jayshon Barham, Oscar Delp. These are guys who could play anywhere. The South Carolina needs to look as cohesive on the field as possible in order to get guys like that. So if it's Zeb, you have to make the call and you have to go with Zeb, regardless of what people may roll their eyes about the headlines and all that stuff. But none of that really matters on Saturday.
It doesn't. And, if I said don't draw comparisons, but just to think back, a lot of people would always bring up Steve Spurrier like last year, right? And they would say, well, Spurrier wouldn't hesitate to pull his quarterback, right? Which was true. He also wouldn't hesitate to make some quarterback decisions as far as starters that people sort of went, what? To be fair about it. So, I mean, the classic example, of course, is the 2008 game against NC State, which was probably one of the most weird college football games ever. Certainly one of the most strange ones I've ever seen at South Carolina in terms of covering the program. South Carolina won that game 34-0, despite Tommy Beecher going in and throwing 4 picks. And he later is supplanted by Chris Smelly, who's a former 4-star recruit, but he was a freshman at the time, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So, it always is interesting. And I think whether or not, the play on the field and the win or the loss will dictate if it was the right move, and look, part of our job and part of being a fan for the fans out there is talking about the team and how you see things maybe playing out. But it is understandable because of the point that you made, and that go to the first 2 games, like you said, Wes. I mean, Eastern Illinois, East Carolina. These 2 games are must-win games to be able to get to the level that South Carolina wants to get to this year. You can't drop one of those games or both of those games and then go on and, say, reach a bowl game. Given this schedule, that's not realistic. So you got to go out and win those. I understand the logic of go out there and throw a freshman or throw Jason Brown out there, even if maybe he's not quite as ready. If you're going to go down with one of those. I understand that. But as coaches, and again, you're right, they are fallible. They can make the wrong call. We'll see. But if you feel like that gives you the best chance to win, protect the football, the things that you're going to need to do to go win those games that on paper you should, then you probably are more apt to make a decision with going with a guy that knows the offense well, has experience, things of that nature.
Yeah, and I tend to think week 2 ECU, if whoever your best quarterback option is for week 1, I kind of think that is your best option for week 2 as well. And because you're going on the road. You're not going to Ohio State by any means, but that's gonna be ECU's Super Bowl. I expect a great crowd. I expect a great atmosphere. I expect a potentially close game. I don't know. I'll be completely honest. I don't know enough about what we should realistically expect from South Carolina, nor do I know enough about ECU's actual players. I just know going on the road for the first time with a new team, new staff, there's so much newness there that from an outside, like non-matchup, like receivers versus DBs or this D-line versus this O-line, from a non-matchup standpoint, that game is kind of scary for South Carolina. So, like you need the guy at quarterback who can command the moment and can handle the moment. So, and that may sound silly. People are like, the moment at ECU, but it's new. This is new for a lot of these guys, and it's certainly new for all of them in this scheme together. So I don't know. I think this is going to be a season where you almost have to. I know every coach every year takes, every season week by week, but South Carolina is going to have to really just manage all the ups and downs of this season incredibly well in order to come out of the other end feeling, I think what is realistic, and let's just do a straw poll. Let's see what is a realistic number for wins. Just throw the number in there. You don't even have to give an explanation. What's a realistic number of wins that you would be happy with? If you're a fan, you can throw it on Facebook. If you're listening on Twitter, YouTube, wherever, give me your number because I'm curious. And you're already seeing. I mean, look, this is insane.
It's a string, yeah.
It is for those who are listening on the podcast, there is a steady stream of the number 6, and then a few 5s. Erland says 7 or 8. Beckham says 5. Got another 8. So you're only going to be happy if they win 8 games. You got to reset. Nick says getting to a bowl. See, or 6. Then somebody says or 7 with the bowl game. So 6 is the number, man. Look at the schedule. Find 6 wins. Your fan base is pretty happy. And that is something you can build off in recruiting because it shows progress. So it actually is kind of eye-opening, man. Like that's most of the time you see a little bit more, what is the word? Like divergence of like opinions. I mean, it was a steady line of the number 6.
Yeah, it was. And look, to get there, that's why we talk about the importance of these first 2 games and then the games that are dotted across the schedule. There aren't many of them, like I said earlier, but the games that South Carolina has the best on paper chance to win. Now, they're not played on paper, obviously, but the point is, I'll go back to the broken record phrase that I already pre-warned you about that I'm going to use a ton this year, but the low margin of error, there's not a lot this year. So there are very few teams on this schedule that you're going to look at it, South Carolina versus whoever, and you're going to say advantage in terms of roster talent and depth is South Carolina in all 3 phases of the game. There will be some teams that South Carolina has, even teams that have a lot more talent overall and a lot more depth. Maybe the D-line's better, or maybe the running backs are better. I'm talking collective talent. Eastern Illinois is certainly one of those games, and that's why, Wes, it's critical that South Carolina doesn't go out there and, like you said, turn the ball over 7 times. that's probably the only way you're losing that game. But it's very important that you don't do that. East Carolina, look, here's all I got to say about that. East Carolina, won't be an easy place to play. Their coach is Mike Houston, who's one of the best football coaches in the country. He won a national championship at James Madison. Before he got there, he was at the Citadel. He was the head coach at the Citadel in 2015. We all know what happened then, right? So this is a guy who, if you're going to go against a coach that kind of scares you from a schematic and a coaching standpoint, somebody that can be a difference maker there, Mike Houston is one. And so you look at that and you say, yeah, South Carolina should be able to kind of out-talent East Carolina. But is it this huge gap or chasm? It's not. It's not at all, I don't think. Again, we got more to learn about East Carolina, but it's not Ohio State versus East Carolina. Like you said, Wes, it's not Alabama versus East Carolina. South Carolina has work to do to continue developing the roster through the guys that are on it, through recruiting, filling holes, developing depth. Those are concerns. It's good that you have these 2 games early that are winnable for sure. But nonetheless, you got to play quite well, I think, in order to win those games.
You do, man. You do. All right, so let's dial back into the scrimmage beyond quarterback. Feedback we've heard, stuff we've heard floating around. You know, it sounds like it was a little bit of a bounce back for the offense this week. I think scrimmage 1, defense seemed well ahead of the offense from some things that they did. A lot of the feedback I've heard, Chris, has remained kind of around the same guys. Juju McDowell, I mean, if you would have told me coming into camp that he would be the talk of camp, I would have said, you know, maybe. I wouldn't have said there's no way that happens. But to the extent it has happened, I probably would have said that's a little bit far-fetched. But consistently, everybody has talked about this kid. He had another big play. And with what we're talking about, as far as South Carolina and playmakers and finding playmakers, I'm not going to sit here and say, move him to the slot, move him to receiver, because I know that's like a common refrain from people. It's not easy just to move a guy to another position who's a freshman. But the more you hear about this kid, Chris, the more I think the key to South Carolina's offensive success, or one of the keys, is going to be to find a way to efficiently use these guys that have sort of different skill sets. And I started out having Jaheim Bell and E.J. Jenkins sort of in that category. Now I'm adding Juju McDowell into that category as well. They're all 3 very different from each other as far as skill sets go. And in fact, lining EJ up beside Juju would actually be a very interesting look, considering the how much different they are in height. But I think getting Juju McDowell on the field has actually some guys just make a statement with their play, and it kind of sounds like he has done that. So can you line him up maybe with some 2-back stuff? Can you line him up where he's in the slot, but you're planning just to motion him and do some jet sweep type stuff? Can you put in some packages for him? Absolutely. I'm wondering, could you put he and Joyner in the backfield together and do some packages like that and sort of package those 2 things together? Absolutely. I've heard, Chris, his reps have continued to go up, not just on the special team side, but on as far as finding ways to get him in the mix. That's, of course, without Kevin Harris still being out there. So you really have one of those good problems to have once he is back, or once Kevin Harris is back. You're going to have some decisions to make as far as carries go at the running back position.
Yeah, and I just kind of thought of this earlier, trying to figure out, a lot of people like comparisons for players and things like that. Maybe Caleb McDowell, Juju McDowell can be a guy that is kind of like maybe a Brandon James kind of player, if you remember him at Florida, smaller guy. Now, Brandon James was a 10-400-meter guy, so super fast. Obviously made the bulk of his plays in the return game, punt returner, kick returner. But I think there's a similar type of skill set there in that, Juju McDowell's not your every down running back like a Kevin Harris or a Marshawn Lloyd. Quandre White. He's not that type of guy, but he can do what he did in high school, which was play some running back, play receiver. He even played DB in high school, and then obviously punt and kick return. And, Pete Limbo, the special teams coordinator at South Carolina, wanted to get a good look at Juju in the return game, to be determined as to whether or not, he'll be the guy or get some opportunities there in game situations. But what we do know is when he's touched the ball in preseason, he's shown the ability to be dangerous and to make big plays. So going back to the point you made, when you look up and down this roster, you're not really thinking at this point about, well, there's 6 different receivers to get the ball to, and there's, all these different guys. You kind of are looking now at positionless football. You're kind of looking at who are the guys that South Carolina can get the ball to no matter what position. Who are your best guys? And then what types of positions can you put them in on the field from a schematic standpoint to where you can get the ball to them, given your questions, and let them go make plays. And so you mentioned a couple of them. Jenkins, because of his matchup capabilities and how he can be a mismatch. Jaheim Bell, because of his unique skill set. McDowell's another one. I mean, if you're going down the list of here's who I want the ball to go to, I would like to see the ball in his hands in an open field situation. Wes McDowell, easily top 10, right? I mean, maybe even top 5 on this roster as far as here's what I would like. Here's a guy I would like to see in the open field. So point is, when you've got a guy like that and he's one of your best guys with the ball in his hands, figure out a way to get it to him. And so as time has gone on, he's become more and more comfortable, and he's shown that in practice. So I'll be very curious to see how much, early he can factor in and how he factors in terms of how he's moved around.
Yeah, and man, I think let's look back over the last couple of years. There haven't been many opportunities where South Carolina has just blown somebody out to get down into the depth of on either side of the ball and get guys a lot of playing time. Get your next linebackers on the field. Get your third string guys on the field on offense. So I think another key to this Eastern Illinois game, man, is just, you go back, Charleston Southern, when they just absolutely crushed them. Even then, I thought there were times you make the case Muschamp left starters in pretty long in games like that. And I get, guys work hard to be able to play. Don't get me wrong. But I think a big part of the first couple of weeks is going to be taking the guys who have gotten the majority of the first team reps in practice, getting them out there first. But then some of these positions where we're not really sure about who plays a bit better when the lights come on. What does Juju McDowell do when he gets his opportunities? What do the second team receivers do when they start to get their opportunities and stuff like that? So as with anything, I imagine all those things are going to become more and more clear as we see it play out on the field and against real opponents. And when they have those opportunities to make plays, can they do that? But man, some guys, we talk about it a lot, Chris, some guys just have a knack and they just make that transition look very easy. And some guys, it takes 2-3 years for the light bulb to sort of come on and they have to develop. Juju McDowell seems to be a guy that just the transition has just clicked very, very simply for him, which is awesome for him and good for South Carolina. You almost wish he was a wide receiver, but it's good either way.
Well, and that's the thing. He is more of a running back and a potential return guy, but can you get him in space from that running back position, that with the ball in his hands, even if it's the reception category? And that's something that's been taught a lot, is getting the backs involved in the passing game. Maybe that's something you can do. Wes, you going back, I had to actually pull, just because you said it, you jogged my memory. I pulled up our Inside the Snap Count feature on Gamecock Central for that Charleston Southern game. That's something, by the way, if you're not familiar with it, we publish snap counts so you can see who played, how much they played every week during the season on Gamecock Central. Wow, it was a lot of people in the Charleston Southern game, for sure. That's by far, I don't even have to go look at another game in the Muschamp era. That is by far the highest number of guys that would have seen action in a game. 7 tight ends played. That's all you need to know. So, and Kevin Harris had maybe one of the more efficient performances in school
In college football history.
It probably, I was going to go there, but yeah, he played 7 snaps, carried the ball 6 times, scored 3 touchdowns, and gained 147 yards. So pretty good in that game. Wes, before we move on, can I jump in real quick? We have renewed our partnership with one of our partners, Dead Soxy, here on GC Live. Going to put this little banner up. There you see it. Gamecock Central partnered with Dead Soxy, those great folks over there. You see up in that, if you're on the live show, the top left-hand corner, that's the spur line of socks, or they have the no-shows. If you want something patriotic, dress socks, whatever you want, go peruse their library, I'm going to use that word, of socks on deadsoxy.com. That's DEADSOXY.com. And because of our partnership at GC Live with Dead Soxy, you can get 25% off your entire order by using the promo code COCKY. So make sure you check those guys out at deadsoxy.com, proud partner here at GamecockCentral.com.
Do we have a specific link for them, Chris, or do they just go to Dead Soxy and they put in the code?
You can go straight to deadsoxy.com.
All right, I'm gonna share that with everyone just to make it.
Yep, make it easy there. So straight to deadsoxy.com. You can check out their entire, catalog there online. You can go to the college section and check out the spur line of socks that they worked with us in conjunction on. And you can check those out and get 25% off. So yeah, just use the promo code COCKY at checkout. And they've always got a lot of good deals going on there in terms of sales internally. So I can save you even more money when you use the promo code.
Yeah, there's if you're on the video stream, the link should be popping up for you there momentarily. Lou Antonelli wants to know about the game that Bailey got hurt. Was that the Akron game, Chris?
That was the Akron game. Yep. He broke his leg late in that game.
2019.
Lots of discussion about that one. That was the one that I think Deebo Samuel played like a half, right? Like I think, didn't he come out after halftime? But lots of starters remained in that game.
Yeah. By the way, shout out to Lou. Lou made an appearance, Chris, at our party. Great dude. He was hanging out with our friends Jen from the Charleston Gamecock Club and her husband. Shout out to them as well. Great to see them. Glad they made the trip up. So yeah, shout out again to everybody that came out. What else we got, man? Let's talk a second about Tyrese Ross, because I think this dude is going to push sooner rather than later. Maybe you could say he already is into the mix at safety. It seems like R.J. Roderick and Jalen Foster right now are your starters at safety. The ones, again, have been pretty much the same every single time we've been out there on the defense, which actually is a very good thing, man, because that means, knock on wood if you're a South Carolina fan, other than Cam Smith, who has missed the entire camp, the guys who started camp with the ones on defense have remained pretty healthy throughout camp.
Yep.
That's not always a given. So that's a blessing if you're South Carolina. But Jalen Foster, R.J. Roderick, R.J. is a guy who's received plenty of praise from Shane Beamer so far. So we'll have eyes on him, eyes on number 10, and then Tyrese Ross. Right now, don't know if he would be a starter, but it sounds like he is pushing his way into that conversation.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one. He was one of the more intriguing players, not just because he's a new player. That always kind of adds a layer when it's a transfer who's new. Your mind automatically goes to, okay, can this guy, jump in and play a more immediate role because he's a transfer, because he's got some experience. And so, for him, getting to campus, in the summer, then missing some time in the preseason, that hampered him a little bit, right? But he does have some experience. He's got some physical tools from what we've heard, Wes. He's got some violence in terms of being a hitter. That's something that South Carolina, that'd be a welcome addition for sure to the safety core. And so we'll see how it plays out. But that's one that I could see in terms of position battles. There are a lot of guys that are probably pretty locked into a starting spot defensively, right, on this team. You think about, for example, a Zach Pickens. You think about J.J. Enagbari. You think about Sherrod Green, R.J. Roderick. There are a lot of guys that seem locked in. that's one with Tyrese Ross to where I could see him continuing to push his way forward in terms of earning more and more playing time, provided that he actually plays well in the games. But there have been some positive returns as of late with his play on the field. So I think that's definitely one to watch.
Yeah, I'm as much as we talk about the players themselves, man, I'm curious to watch this defense and try to get a feel for what it looks like schematically. I'll be honest, I try to like stay up on that stuff and what trends are defensively, and is this more of a man defense, more of a zone defense? A lot of times defenses have gotten they've had to keep up with offenses, so it's sometimes hard to tell because man and zone has really sort of gone away to an extent to where it's combo this and combo that, and half field is in man, half the field is in zone, and it's hard to tell. I've got it written down. I think we're probably going to follow up with some former players after we get a game or two of footage and try to get an idea of exactly what South Carolina's doing, what they're showing on defense, because that, as much as we've talked about offense and what this scheme is going to look like, other than it's going to be aggressive, it's maybe a little bit more simple to learn. Other than stuff like that, I don't know that the conversation about the defense and what it truly is has necessarily been had a whole lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and same can be said for the offense, where you can go back and we know from what's been said publicly, what some of the stuff we've heard behind the scenes, and going back and looking at some of the concepts that we know are going to be or have been integrated into this offense. But at the same time, you haven't seen that as a cohesive product on the field, and so I think whether it's offense, defense, and special teams, because of Pete Lembo and his reputation, you're kind of looking at all those things, and there's just there's kind of some mystery there and a lot of excitement in terms of being able to pick out exactly what it looks like. So, yeah, definitely I think that's in the cards to be able to go back and talk to some former players. There's going to be, I think, Wes, a lot of assessing to do after game one, right? Not just – if you're a South Carolina fan, you certainly hope that the score line is not a worry throughout the game, that you're just more enjoying things and you're able to look at things rather than sit there and, agonize over it being a third or fourth quarter game. But regardless, I mean, outcome aside, there are going to be so many things to talk about and to analyze in game one of the Shane Beamer era.
I was thinking about the show today, and I was sort of thinking in terms of depth chart, and I was like, what are some position battles we can highlight other than quarterback? And the more I went through the different position groups, the more it sort of almost seems like with 2 weeks to go, less than 2 weeks now, there's always competition. Don't get me wrong. But it does seem like it's almost kind of settled going in already. Quarterback, I think, is certainly still, I mean, we've had that conversation today. Maybe running back just because you got so much talent there.
Yeah.
Is Cam Smith back? We'll find out. So that's like an asterisk almost. But other than that, I mean, it sounds like Aaron Sterling has held off the two, the young stud and Jordan Birch and the transfer and Jordan Strong. It sounds like my prediction that Tonka Hemingway was going to earn a starting spot is going to be a dud. For now. It sounds like the two sort of quote veterans are going to win the linebacker spots right now. So, I mean, surely there may be one other surprise coming. I don't know, man, but it seems like for the most part they've started to settle in on the top guys.
They have. And, it's always going to be interesting because a lot of people say, coaches and observers, you never really know until you hit the field. And so, heck, I remember, I mean, this is just the first example that came to mind. I mean, 2019, there were a couple guys that started for South Carolina in game one of that game that did not end up starting, right? The next game, at least one. I think there were a couple guys. And so that can happen. you never know how a guy's going to perform. Even some guys that maybe have some seasoning, they're going to be out there in a new scheme. It's a new year, whatever it may be. There's a variety of factors to consider. And so you got to assess their actual play. So I think, though, Wes, maybe not as many who's going to take the first snap at this particular position going into this year. Running back's one, like you said, still quarterback. But I do think there's room for adjustment at some certain spots. Tonka Hemingway's one. Like Tonka Hemingway, Ross at safety. I mean, those are two that really come to mind that I could see those guys, if they make the most of their opportunities when they do get in there, you're going to see them play, more and more. And I think I see those as a little bit different even than what you mentioned with Sterling. Yeah, he's got Birch back there, who's a former 5-star, uber talented guy, Strawn, who led the nation in sacks last year. Aaron Sterling's a really good player. He's a super senior. If he were a couple inches taller, he'd be getting NFL buzz. He's just not as tall. And Mike Peterson loves the guy. He's kind of one of the heartbeat guys on their defense, and he's just super reliable. So a little bit different there. But there are a few battles that I think you could see going either way. And there can always be surprises. 2016, Wes, here's a poll for you. Jamari Smith, you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Started that game in the slot against Vanderbilt. Heard a lot of good things in the offseason.
Heard about him all camp.
All camp. Great camp. Unfortunately, just didn't come together for him on the field. Had some drops, seemed to lose confidence. Didn't end up playing a ton that year. So you just never know. But in terms of going into game one, you're right. It does seem that there's more, settlement than not at most spots.
Yeah, so we shall see, man. What's up, Tyler? He just popped in on YouTube. What's up to everybody else still in the chat? I'm sure I missed some people along the way. Man, I completely forgot my train of thought, Chris. I was about to go to one final topic. I
got one I wanted to bring up. Go ahead before you forget.
No, I was gonna say, and this will be for subscribers only. But I just had an idea. I do still have one more gift card from my buddy Kevin Silbinder over at the Grand. I've given out 3 of them. I got one more. Grand, great spot. I think we're going to have to do a contest. A first touchdown, first carry, first. We'll start it on there pretty soon. So if you're a subscriber, the Insiders Forum, we'd love to give away stuff to reward our subscribers. So be on the lookout for that at the top of the Insiders Forum. One of our next big contests, we'll give away a gift card to who can best predict. We'll go first touchdown. I think that'll be simple enough. So be on the lookout for that. Anyway, go ahead, Chris.
So I was going to hit on one of the questions because this was kind of a talking point that I had planned on addressing at some point anyway. It's from Adam Higgins, Periscope. Do you think Zach Pickens takes the next step and starts to fulfill his potential? Great question. Key question, I think. Zach Pickens is one of those guys that has appeared to lock up a starting spot. But beyond that, I've kind of been asking around for the thought on Pickens. And again, got to go show it. But there is some confidence within the program that Zach Pickens is ready to take his game to the next level. And look, by that, I don't mean he's going to come out as a consensus All-American first-round pick after his junior year. What I mean is take another step towards living up to that potential. This is a former 5-star guy. He had to make the adjustment to playing inside, growing into his body, playing with more technique, different technique than what he was accustomed to at the high school level, where he played running back, he played D-line, just kind of run roughshod over everybody, turning that into getting in the trenches with big, talented offensive linemen and playing with technique. So going into year 3, there is, it appears, some a thought within the program that he's made progress. He's starting to play with more technique, which is key, as opposed to just relying on his physical tools. And so if he can put that together, Wes, I think he's got a chance to come out having had, his best season yet at South Carolina. It's a guy with a lot of potential, NFL-type potential, if he can reach it.
And that would go a long way for South Carolina, right? Like we've heard a lot of good things about this defensive front. They've been really good in practice. They've been really good in the lead in. The best way to help out those linebackers, the best way to help out that secondary would be if this defensive front can keep playing well. That would be a key, obviously, for the entire season. As we get closer, we'll talk to Keys the first game. Obviously, we always do that. So I spoke to a Gamecock group on Friday afternoon, Chris, and we were talking about Josh Vann. And, I think certainly Pickens is a guy that can take a step forward. But we were sort of talking about who are those guys that have just most benefited from a new staff and a new approach and just a new lease on their football lives. And, we were talking about RJ Roderick on defense, and we were talking about Josh Vann on offense. And some of them were kind of, they're like, well, we're in show me mode on Josh Vann. And I said, yeah, I get it completely. How important is it for someone like a Josh Vann to catch the first pass that comes his way this season? Just to like, I was thinking about that when you brought up Jamari Smith, man. Like, I really, just for Josh Vann's sake, because it's been an up and down career for him. He seems settled in. He seems happy. He's really bought into the culture from a Beamer standpoint and a Justin Stepp position coach standpoint. But he really needs for like those first couple of passes that go to him to be hauled in and him sort of have that feeling of, all right, like, I'm here. I can do this. To me, it seems like a small thing, but it could be a big thing.
And I don't know if he used this exact terminology. He spoke to the media for quite a while earlier this season in camp. I don't know if he used the term lost confidence like directly, but from a lot of the things that he said and kind of even just what you observed, what you heard, Wes, he lost confidence. And I think that was the case for a lot of guys on this team. Collectively, I think the team had lost confidence. Individually, a lot of them have. Vann wasn't alone in that. I mean, Jalen Brooks got up there that same day and basically said that, wasn't in a good headspace, all that. So Vann now is going into this year knowing that when they're in three receiver set, true three receiver, he's one of the guys out there and he's going to be counted on. He's going to have opportunities. And so I think that has helped him because he was used to that in high school. Former big-time recruit, 4-star guy, nationally rated wide receiver prospect. He has talent. That's not the issue. You don't look at Josh Vann and say he just can't get it done. He doesn't have the talent. He can't run. He can't, he doesn't have ball skills. He has those things. And so it's just about turning around his confidence. And I think that's huge, Wes, like you said, for him to be able to go out and actually establish it on the field early, pick up some confidence. He's a guy that has the type of ability to where he could build on that.
Yep, and I think as we talk expectations, that's been an underlying trend for the entire show. Expectations of this receiving core, I'll say it again, it doesn't have to be that they go make the spectacular play. To me, it's can they go get what is available? Can they hold on to the football when it's there? How different would even last year have been, Chris? Not if the receivers went out and made Alshon Jeffrey plays, but as they held on to the ball at a higher percentage of the time. In a perfectly timed tweet, I was just glancing through Twitter right now as we were talking. SEC StatCat posted, I mean, you never know what random stat you're going to get from this kid. We had him on the show last year. I'm thinking, Chris, we need to get him back on the show maybe week 2 or 3 after South Carolina's had a couple of some film of the offense and get his thoughts on this thing, because he will give you an unfiltered opinion of what it is and what it isn't. But he posted the drops from last year for SEC teams. And South Carolina was 3rd worst in the conference in pure number of drops, but worst in the conference in percentage of drops. So 36 total drops. Florida actually had 46 drops last year, but that was 9.9% of their passes, whereas South Carolina had a 12.4% drop rate. So to give some perspective on that, Like Vandy was best. Vandy was actually best in the league in drops. They had a 4% drop rate. Georgia had an 8%. Ole Miss had a 7%. So, 12% over an entire course of a season is a ton. So, you don't have to go make the spectacular play, but can you hold on to the ball when you have opportunities to extend the chains and make first downs at a better rate than last year? Will be a key for South Carolina. Jonathan asks, can we go 6-6, or am I crazy to think we can go 12-0?
Awesome.
I'm not going to call you crazy, man, because you seem like a good guy. But South Carolina ain't going 12-0. Somebody asked earlier, what are our expectations? I agree with what y'all said. 6 is like I'm not even saying I expect South Carolina to go 6, because I don't like making predictions because I just feel like there's too many variables. When people make predictions,
Right.
most of the time, Chris, they're pulling a number out of thin air. And I could pull a number and say, yeah, they'll get 6 wins. But is that realistic? Is that most likely? I don't know. I just think 6 is where you sit there and you circle. You say, if they get to 6, it's a positive step and it's something fans should actually be happy for. And that doesn't mean you're lowering expectations. That doesn't mean that you are setting a ceiling for the season. It just means that right now is realistic. And if you have a new coaching staff, you have to find what is realistic, but also what would signal progress.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 6 would signal progress. 5 is also realistic, but I feel like people, rightfully so, have a hard time getting excited over 5 wins.
That's very true because of, you generally consider, okay, 6 wins and everybody's thinking bowl game. And that's always a good measure of progress for a team that, won 2 last year, won shortened season, but won 2 last year and 4 the year before. So getting above anything above that is good. And then obviously getting to a bowl, there's all sorts of benefits to that, extra practice, perception of a bowl game, something you can sell in recruiting, all that kind of stuff. But look, Vegas right now has South Carolina set, from what I see, 3.5. So pretty low bar, right?
Whew.
I don't want to say if you get over that, it's gravy, because you don't want to say 4 wins is excellent for this program. I don't think so. But I do think being realistic in year one for a low margin team is here's how people should measure progress. I think it goes back to what Shane Beamer says. I agree with him. He's not going to sit there ever and say, like if he's on Carolina College, Todd, if we win 8 games, that's great. Why would he say? He's not going to say that. I think he's had a good answer to it. If we can be the best team we can be and maximize our ability, maximize our potential this year, it'll have been a good season. So if South Carolina does that, if they do that, it's probably about a 6-win team. Like that's my opinion. That's not to say it could be less. That's not even to say South Carolina couldn't go out there and steal a game or two and do even better. I think that's going to be pretty difficult. But the kind of the baseline should be win the games that you're supposed to on paper, maybe go steal one, be competitive. Be competitive, and that can be relative. If you're playing Clemson and Georgia, being competitive is going to be different, probably even than Florida this year or than a Missouri, Kentucky, right? To have the type of season that you want to have, you're going to need to go beat a Missouri or a Kentucky this year. And those are going to be, at best, toss-up games, I think, for South Carolina. So it's a difficult schedule for them, but there are some wins that can be had. I just take it back and I simplify it, Wes, and say rather than a kind of a number, because it can be a week-to-week thing, are you competitive? Are you maximizing this team's potential?
Good stuff, man. All right, we're actually over an hour now. It's right at 3:00, so time for us to get out of here. Great stuff, great discussion because we have stuff to talk about, which is fun. We're gonna have some guests coming up. I I saw our good buddy Andy Boyd on Friday, Chris, and me and Andy talked about him hopping on the podcast, and so we're going to make that happen. I need to reach out and see exactly when works for Andy. But Andy, great dude. I've known Andy forever. I knew Andy all 12 years he was at South Carolina. So looking forward to hearing from Andy. I'm working on some other. I thought you were going to leave me hanging on that, Chris, and just be
it took a minute for my brain fogged as a 12. Yeah.
But
hey, there's a rumor, Wes, that we could be hopping on with Andy and our buddy Greg at Primal at the same time. Rumor.
Okay. Are we going to get free food out of this?
I don't see
work that into the contract.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why we shouldn't be eating at Primal during the podcast to highlight their excellent food.
Yes, Primal Gourmet, great spot right across the bridge in the West Columbia, Casey area. I believe their address is technically West Columbia. I know I get the lines over there confused, honestly, but it is West Columbia. Great folks, great food. They're a sponsor on GamecockCentral.com, one of our main sponsors on top of our message board. We actually have a deal from them if you go on there and click through right now. But if you're like me and you're trying to get back into a healthy eating habit, which while planning this party, I have been chugging sugary coffee crap for about 2.5 weeks. I've got to get back to the gym, and I've got to get back on a healthy eating deal. It's really cool. If you're not into meal prep, but you want to be, they have all types of meal prep options for you as well. So we'll get on there. We'll get Andy to tell some Spurrier stories. He was there for 4 different eras of coaches, I think. So we'll let Andy tell all kinds of stories, man. All right, y'all, that's it. We got some guests lined up, though. We're going to have some cool guests coming up throughout the season. For Chris, I'm Wes. We'll see y'all soon.